This is Talk Business and Politics with Roby Brock.
And welcome to the program. I'm Roby Brock. We are glad to have you with us. Joined by U.S. Representative French Hill, Republican, representing the 2nd District of Arkansas. Good to see you.
Roby, great to be back. Thanks for the invite.
Yes, well, I'm glad to have you here. We got a lot to talk about, so I got you for an extended version today. We're going to start with the impeachment inquiry, which you voted against in Congress a couple of weeks ago. Tell me why you voted against it.
Well, I looked at the impeachment inquiry resolutions for Richard Nixon, designed by Democrats, and the impeachment inquiry resolution designed by Republicans for Bill Clinton, and compared them. And I found this one lacking in transparency, lacking in due process rights for the president and his witnesses, and lacking in fairness between the minority and majority compared to those. And I thought it violated Speaker Pelosi's desire to have a fair and open, transparent process.
So it was about the process, not about the behavior that has been made public. You have a problem, your vote was hinged upon the process.
No, that's what we were voting on, is the process.
Right.
That's why I made process comments. The Democrats in the House have every right as a co-equal branch of government to do inquiry about things that they don't think President Trump has done right or well through the normal oversight process. It's Nancy Pelosi that's called it an impeachment inquiry, when just a few months ago she said we would never commence an impeachment inquiry unless there was overwhelming evidence to that point and that it was fully bipartisan. And she's not even hit her own threshold for that. So for me,
she hadn't hit her threshold on that on the bipartisan front?
On the bipartisan front or on the overwhelming evidence, because they don't even have an open, transparent oversight policy. If you were doing foreign affairs oversight, you would do it in open public hearings when there's no classified information, and you'd pursue it in that way, and that's not what the House has chosen to do.
Well, let's talk about what has been made public through either the call summary of the transcript that the president has released, the whistleblower complaint. There have been some opening statements from some of the private hearings that were out there. We're starting to see some of the transcripts being released from some of those private hearings. The president used his office and the levers of the federal government to hold up military aid to Ukraine for the promise of investigating Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden. That's my takeaway of how I read that. Is that an impeachable offense?
Well, I don't know that you can read it that way, because I don't think that that's what the evidence has shown, and that's not what the evidence has been laid out on a fair and open basis. I think you can look at Ambassador Volker's testimony or Bill Gibson's testimony and come to a different conclusion on that. What I would say is that it was President Trump that armed the Ukrainians, that our professional diplomats were concerned about. President Obama had not done that. Or as they said in the released transcript, President Obama was offering blankets. It's the Trump administration that offered lethal aid to the Ukrainians. And secondly, that aid was forthcoming in early September. It was released. It was not, from reading the transcript of the call, held up as been alleged.
Well,
and
it was released after the whistleblower complaint became public, though. 2 days after the whistleblower complaint became public is when the funding was released.
Well, I don't know that we can connect all those dots. If we had a fair and open hearing with cross-examination, multiple witnesses, open hearing, maybe somebody could draw that conclusion. What I've seen over the last 40 days or so is selective leaks, selective spin from the Democrats, and I think you could say there's selective spin from Republicans in reaction to it, because none of it's public. The other thing I want listeners to understand is that in 2014, during the Obama administration, we passed a law, it was right before I joined Congress in 2015, that demanded the executive branch insist on corruption policies in the Ukraine before any aid was released to Ukraine. That was repeated in the 16, 17, and 18 National Defense Authorization Acts. So Congress has asked the executive branch to certify that corruption is under control in probably the most corrupt country in Europe, in Ukraine.
The allegation has been that the president specifically asked for the corruption investigation to be of Joe Biden, his son Hunter, and Burisma. So it wasn't look at wholesale corruption, it was look at this specific potential instance here of a political rival.
Well, when you look at the transcript that was released of the call from the NSC, It mentions CrowdStrike, which relates to the 16 meddling in the 16 presidential election. It does mention, as you say, some reference to the Bidens and reference to corruption, but that's unclear to me how that's going to go down. And the question is if he did that, and I still say that's an open conversation in the Congress, is that somehow an impeachable offense or not, given the corruption issues in Ukraine, which is at the heart of this problem?
So are you telling me that you're open-minded that he could still have committed an impeachable offense, or are you telling me you don't think that that's a possibility?
I don't know, because I'm not on this committee listening to this information.
But
so
it
that's
will come
unclear
out.
to me.
Do you think?
I don't know if it will or not, actually, with the way this is
open
designed.
hearings, so.
Well, is it? I mean, we're going to have some open hearings, but we've enshrined the Intelligence Committee as suddenly the Judiciary Committee. We've enshrined the process that's already been in place for the last 40 days as a private, secret process. So we'll see if it comes out or not.
I think the hearings are going to be open starting this next week, is what I have read, at least. I still believe some of the fake news in Washington.
Yeah.
Let's take a quick commercial break, and we'll come back and talk about some other things with Congressman French Hill. I'm Roby Brock. We're back right after this. And we're back with Congressman French Hill. Let's move on to some other things that Congress could be, should be, might be doing here. Let's start with the replacement of NAFTA, the USMCA. This is a trade agreement that replaces the North American Free Trade Agreement. When do you expect a vote, and what do you think it will pass by?
Well, first of all, we've talked about that on this show before. I think it's the single most important thing besides federal spending policy that we could do in Congress this year. It's something that could have come to the Congress weeks and weeks ago, but it's been held up by Speaker Pelosi for her process. I had dinner with the ambassador from Mexico and the ambassador from Canada last week. They've been working hard on it. The administration has been working hard on it to get Nancy Pelosi to yes. I was very encouraged.
What do you think her holdup is?
Her holdup is, I guess, either perfection inside her conference, or maybe she's not serious about getting it done. I'm not sure. She says that she wants to get to yes. I'll take her at her word on that, and yet for months now she hasn't gotten to yes. So I still hope it can pass. She's let it slide again. She said 40 days ago that it could be voted on in November. Now she said recently this week that she might not vote on it till January. When you listen to Canadians and Mexicans who have already approved this deal, and to Ambassador Lighthouser, there's nothing else to be done. This deal is ready. It's an improvement over NAFTA. It will help the U.S. It'll help over 100,000 Arkansans have a better trade future. If it came to the floor, I think it would pass overwhelmingly, maybe 250 or 260 votes.
I think the votes are there too. I think it's a matter of time. I think it happens before the next election cycle. So let's talk about the trade war between the U.S. and China. I feel like every time I hear something new on this, whether it's a business news report or the president tweeting or whatever, I feel like it's Lucy and Charlie Brown in the football, and we're running up to kick it again, and it gets pulled back and gets pulled away. If I'm the Chinese, why do I cut a deal now? It's less than a year until the next election. I might be dealing with somebody different in a year. The tariffs may go away a year from now. Why would the Chinese cut a deal at this juncture?
Well, two comments on that. First of all Chinese behavior since the mid-1990s to now has always been rewarded. Bill Clinton suggested 100% tariffs in 1990s over intellectual property theft by the Chinese. Nothing happened, and they were actually rewarded in 2001 with WTO membership in the World Trade Organization. So for the Chinese, they have to wonder that they've been rewarded all these years. Why not wait it out? Not only just because of the presidential election next year, but just generally. Why not just wait it out because of their influence around the world in the United States and European Union? I still have hopes that this pressure, this intensive pressure that President Trump has brought to China and is backed up quietly behind the scenes by the Japanese and the European Union, can produce finally a more market opening in China. We want intellectual property protected. It's never been protected, never. Many, many efforts.
Right.
We want market opening for services and products, way beyond agriculture. And we want the Chinese to agree to follow the World Trade Organization rules. That benefits not only U.S. business and consumers, but it benefits Europe and Japan, and it benefits, frankly, it benefits China long.
Are you hearing from second district business owners that it is harming their business?
I've heard mixed. Of course, I hear a lot from our agricultural producers that it has disrupted profits in the bean market, particularly. You know that, you've covered that. I hear more about steel and aluminum tariffs generally, which is a Trump trade policy that I've opposed over the months, that's hurt and raised prices in the steel and aluminum manufacturing business. So not so much. In fact, I've had people say, we've moved our production to another country. Mm-hmm. We believe China's been a bad actor. We appreciate the president taking a firm stance to try to get change this time. And I think that's the biggest challenge for Donald Trump. Can he, with the force of his will to make this his top trade issue, be successful? And I think the jury's way out, and that's not because of a personal opinion I have, but just the course of history of negotiating with the Chinese.
Well, and it's just some reality too, if you just look at some of the political cards that are being held there. Lastly, let's talk about the conflict in China. Has subsided some since it was such a hot button topic a couple of weeks ago here. The president made a quick, some say rash decision on this without much consultation. To others, you've been extremely critical of the situation in Syria, but you didn't single the president out in your criticism there. You made mention of what you think is going to happen. Why not tell the president he made a mistake?
No, I've called the president about this, and I've talked to him about this, and I think my statement was quite clear. I think that the president has a goal of blocking Iran's influence in the region. Part of what's happening in Syria is directly connected to that. I made that point. And secondly, I think that you should not change policy without a plan in advance. And when the president proposed to pull troops out of Syria and declare victory over ISIS back the last week of December during the Christmas holidays, a lot of us pushed back. He stepped back from it and gave more consideration to it. And I was frankly surprised to see that no plan was presented to him by his commanders or by the State Department on how to achieve that transition.
I think they may not have been consulted
on
it. So.
No, from my understanding, they were consulted, but it was not the right way to handle it, was the point I made in my statement. It's okay to reposition those troops, think about northeast Syria in another way vis-a-vis this conflict. But we should have had that plan in place. It would have included Turkey, could have included the Iraqis, the French, the British, and we didn't do it. And then we turn right around and reverse it. Mm-hmm. And
why do you think he did it?
Because I think his overwhelming personal opinion is that we should be prepared for strategic great power conflict with China and Russia, and that we should be shepherding our troops and our troop deployments where they are around the world, and that we should make sure we have strong allied support and allied financial support from our partners, particularly in NATO on that. I think that's a personal view for him.
Do you share his view?
I share his view that great power conflict is important and that we have to have the national defense strategy to combat it. I think we have that strategy, but tactically, I believe where we were positioned in northeast Syria was at a minimum footprint with the greatest capacity to have leverage over Assad in Syria and have leverage over the Iranian situation, which is why I disagreed with the decision. Under whatever circumstances were taken to make it, I disagree with it.
Yeah. All right, Congressman French Hill, as always, appreciate you sitting down with us.
Thank you, Robert.
All right, we're back with more right after this.